And we're live. Welcome to Doctor's Homestead. My name's Daniel.
And I'm Janet.
And I'm Strangely Jay.
Strangely Jay is with us today. We're digging into George Orwell's 1984. This is our fourth night. Fourth night. So that seems to be where we're at right now. We're getting about takes us about 4 nights to get through a book. The first one really was introduction. The second one was, we call it book one. So the way the book's split is book one, book two, book three, and then there's chapters in each book. So second night we covered book one, third night we covered book two, and now we're on book three.
Yeah.
Most likely going to conclude tonight on 1984. So our next book we're going to jump into is Jack London's Iron Heel, which was written at the beginning of 19th century. I want to say 1908, 1909, 1908.
Yeah.
Always mess up on those. Interesting. I did not realize this, right? I was sort of speculating kind of a tie between Iron Heel, Jack London, and George Orwell, and starting to do a little research just to do my own write-up on the book. And apparently Orwell was inspired by Iron Heel to write 1984.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of cool. Yeah, it just kind of found it out of obscurity. And it's not really a prequel to 1984, but it was the inspiration for 1984. So kind of cool. We're going backwards. I mean, it feels almost prequel-ish just because it's a socialist revolution in America in the early 1900s. Not going to give anything away beyond that, but you could almost see how it could lead to the 1984 situation. And then the next book we want to hit is Zero Sum Conclusion, written by Thomas Lipinski. He's actually going to join us live for that. That's probably going to be in June, which is sort of placed as a sequel to 1984. So somehow we've stumbled upon the prequel and the sequel without really trying.
Obviously, it's a greatly loved book.
Right.
It's giving so much inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, we weren't trying to do that, but somehow we're hitting the prequel and the sequel and the original all in a reverse messed up order.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right, which is all right. So
don't have to be a straight line all the time.
Doesn't have to be a straight line. So quick summary of where we're at. Our main character, chapter 1 was really he woke up, he was forced to do his exercises, he was writing in his journal, which he thought was a thought crime, went to work, hates his job, comes home, helped the neighbor with some plumbing, kids didn't like him, right? And I think that
the demon children, as he said.
Demon children, the neighbor's kids suck. And he went to the antique store. He went antiquing. And I think that was sort of summarized chapter 1.
It just seems so strange to be
he went antiquing. Right. So I would call that That's
a very southern thing. Like our downtown's very old.
Right.
And it's filled with antique shops.
So if you've ever,
yeah, I get the antiquing, but not for 1984.
Right. So if you've never read the book, that's chapter 1.
He did go down to the Prole district to seek the past to see if it really was better, and so maybe he was just drawn in there because he'd already been there. That's where he'd bought the journal from. Right. I think so.
I'm still just surprised. It is
it's a silly
what I mean?
It's a trap. The antique store is a trap.
Yes, it's a complete trap. They're sitting outside checking to see who's going into the antique store, and they're like, oh, okay. We're gonna have to snoop on those guys now.
Must be subversive if he's going to the antique store, which is kind of ironic because I may have mentioned this before. We'd go antiquing and I would look for old dictionaries at the antique store because definitions have changed. So it's almost like subversive at that point. You're at the antique store looking for these old dictionaries to try to find the old meanings of words. So I feel I can feel the main character there at that point trying to seek out the original meanings of some of these words we use.
I'm always surprised at the amount of chicken paraphernalia and cattle feeders and stuff like that.
That's probably because where we live.
Well, that city folks are buying to hold their napkins on a table. I'm like, that's a chicken feeder. But they're selling
That's not a napkin holder.
They're selling it for $25 as a napkin holder.
Well, and that was a trend. That was a trend where and people have like fake seed bags and stuff. They're trying to look like they're all rural and they got all those decorations, and I'm just looking like, oh, okay. That's
I mean,
neat.
I have them laying around, but I actually use them.
Yeah, I've got a stack of those outside full of feed, but I can tell that's a fake one. I can tell very rural of you to have the fake stuff.
Well, out here, everybody goes and has these barn weddings.
Right. Yeah. 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 The barn wedding.
They all live in the city and they want to come take pictures with chickens. I'm like, why is she holding a chicken in her wedding dress? That chicken's gonna poop on her.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we diverted a little bit. Chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Hooks up with a girl. Yeah. Chapter 1, he went antiquing. Chapter 2, hooks up a girl from work, has a little bit of an affair, tries to join. What was that?
If it was us, we'd get lost because we wouldn't be able to
get lost. Yeah,
Jay and I would be
lost
totally
in the woods trying to find those obscure directions.
And then we'd go into the antique store, and people would be, following us for the rest of the time.
Right.
That's strangely Jay.
Right. Tries to join the local revolutionary group. Doesn't work out. Gets in trouble. Gets arrested.
I don't like people enough to
try to join that.
Join a revolutionary group.
Right. Fictitious just revolutionary group
gives me the hives.
Sounds like more than one people.
Right. I just want
a lot of people.
I want a couple people that I like.
That's about it. Not a group.
I don't need 100.
Don't need a whole group.
Right.
So I think that catches you up on the book. If you've never read the book, I think that probably covers most of it.
Right. That's the quick spark notes.
That's the quick.
If you
that's
want to
the
know
double
the end,
quick spark notes. You got to stick around.
And it ends with them getting arrested in the antique shop.
In the antique shop, right, as you should. That's why you're not reading the book, right? They were reading a book in the antique shop. Busted big time. Busted.
Yeah. And something that struck with me, particularly with all of the, the setups, is that maybe also Goldstein, maybe the book itself is a form of controlled opposition. That's just
putting out there. No.
Yeah. And so they've made up the boogeyman,
I think so. No, absolutely. And that's a great term for it. That term hadn't occurred to me because I think we see that a lot nowadays, controlled opposition.
Oh.
Boogeyman.
I thought you meant boogeyman.
The boogeyman term.
Boogeyman?
No, controlled opposition seems to be pretty common nowadays. I feel like that's exactly the world we live in, is a lot of power, a lot of controlled opposition, not a lot of truth to power. Right. You got to be very careful on speaking truth to power nowadays, but controlled opposition, absolutely. I think that's pretty much, I think, how everything runs now. All right. So now we get into the torture scene.
Yay.
Right.
Yeah, it's rough. Sorry, dude.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. We went, dude goes to work, hates his job. We got the love story. Now we got the torture chapter.
Right.
I'll
be honest. When I was reading this, I'm like, man, I hope that was some good sex, because
it wasn't.
This is a lot of torture.
It's a lot of torture here. Yeah. Now we get to the re-education of Winston, is what you call book 3, chapter 1. So let's just jump into it. Winston sits in a bright, bare cell in which the lights are always on, which was always his dream. He always wanted to meet in a place where there was no darkness.
Well, there's no darkness there.
He has at last arrived at the place where there's no darkness. 4 telescreens monitor him. He has been transferred here from a holding cell.
4 telescreens. Wow.
4
That's
cameras.
No joke.
Right,
It's one dude, 4 telescreens.
Right. In which a huge prolly woman who shares the last name Smith wonders if she is Winston's mother. Okay, I didn't catch that. In the solitary cell, Winston envisions his captors beating him, and he worries that sheer physical pain will force him to betray Julia, which it does. Ampleforth, a poet whose crimes was leaving the word God in a Rudyard Kipling translation, is tossed into the cell. He is soon dragged away to the dreaded room 101, a place of mysterious and unspeakable horror. Winston shares his cell with a variety of fellows. I'm sorry?
Oh, everyone was going on about it.
Yeah, no one wants to go room 101.
Yeah.
Right, 101.
Really,
right.
Yeah, really built it up,
It was pretty horrible, right? I'm not giving away any spoilers. We're going to get to it probably
It was
today.
You know what's in there.
Right. Room 101 was pretty horrible.
101.
Yeah, that one was a pretty horrible place. All right, a place of mysterious and unspeakable horror. Winston shares a cell with a variety of fellow prisoners, including his flatulent neighbor Parsons, who was turned in by his own children for committing thought crime.
Right, the demon children. They really make the kids demons in this.
Yeah, he was talking in his sleep. Thought crime.
Oh no,
thought crime.
Down with your brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kids, big heroes, the kids.
Which teaches you should wake up before your children.
Right, wake up before the children. Close the door at night.
Yeah.
Avoid the thought crimes with kids.
Do not nap around your kids.
Right. Yeah. Can't trust them. We'll have to get to Lord of the Flies soon. Maybe we'll do Lord of the Flies.
I love that. That's one of my favorite books is Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies and Of Mice and Men, but I don't think Of Mice and Men fits into your dystopian world.
Nah, not so much, but we'll see.
I've had many a pet with Of Mice and Men names from characters in it.
Right, all right. Seeing starvation, beating, and mangling, Winston hopes dearly that the Brotherhood will send him a razor blade, which with he might commit suicide if the Brotherhood even exists.
Mm-hmm.
His dreams of the Brotherhood are wrecked when O'Brien, his hoped-for link to the rebellion, enters his cell. Winston cries out, "They got you too," to which O'Brien replies, "They got me a long time ago," and identifies himself as an operative of the Ministry of Love. O'Brien asserts that Winston has known O'Brien was an operative all along, and Winston admits this is true. A guard smashes Winston's elbow, and Winston thinks that no one can be a hero in the face of physical pain because it's too much to endure. And I think he was trying to eat some bread. Right. I think there was some bread, like he got some bread somehow at some point, and that's when he got smashed.
Oh, this was a disturbing part of the book for me.
I like how O'Brien's like, you always knew I wasn't actually part of the Brotherhood. And he's like, yeah, I guess I did.
It's kind of like,
got it.
Are you really that dumb that you didn't get
Did you really know? You really didn't know? Yeah. You didn't know.
Like it was the perfect setup. You didn't.
Right. You didn't know.
Right. Put the ball right on the tee for you. You didn't think that maybe it was a trap.
Right. All right. So that was really chapter 1 is the warm up, right? The prison warm up. You know, he's in the cell, you know, kind of in the waiting room cell where all the people are coming in and there's different people.
Yeah, this is the nice part.
Yeah, this is the nice part of the prison. You know, he got yelled at a couple times, and that's when Winston comes in and is like, yeah, you always knew. We got you. We got you, buddy. You know, he was hoping for his razor blade, didn't show up.
Yeah, it didn't show up.
I just don't get what the point is of all that. If they knew, they already had everything on him. No, of catching him. They could have caught him in the beginning.
Right.
Why did they allow it to go on for so long?
Maybe so that it would be more justified than just a disgruntled employee.
Yeah, I mean,
so he was a disgruntled employee, then he was a revolutionary. So maybe they were just building the charges on him.
I mean, it just seems like they had enough charges once he said he was going to join the revolution.
Well, and that's when they took him down. Right.
I thought they were still meeting each other at that point several times.
Well, no, because they got the book. Once he got the book and he sat down and read the book, they're like, we got you.
Oh, okay. So we actually read the book.
Yeah.
Not just saying that he was going to be part of the cause. He actually had to have the book.
I mean, it would seem in the dystopian world, they could just grab people and torture them for any reason.
Like,
but I feel like they were actually waiting. They were building up the case against him. Not that they need a trial.
Oh, okay.
Seeing how much he was really willing to do. Yeah. Like they can't just beat up every disgruntled citizen.
Yeah.
Or maybe they could.
Maybe they had standards. I don't know.
Right. At some point, he crossed a line of disgruntled.
Well, yeah, because they brought in the neighbor and that you wouldn't even, they weren't as far down as Winston. So what happened with them? Did they just go back or?
Right. At what point? Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Guess we'll find out maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe I just zoned out and missed something.
No,
that is quite possible.
I don't know that they really said, oh, you know, this was the final crime.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they let him go. They let him go. I mean, it was very controlled because they always had him on.
They enjoy the process of it.
Oh, I think absolutely.
That they allowed it to go on for so long.
Yeah.
So it could make them feel better with the gotcha.
Yeah.
You know, like they were actually
thought cat and mouse.
Yes. Like,
right.
Yes.
When he was always in the trap.
Right. He was always in the trap. They had already trapped him.
He'd never escaped.
So it wasn't about trapping. It was about the chase of the trap.
It was the chase, and then the torture's about the break.
Yeah.
You know, they're doing it because they want to they enjoy it. I think
that's what I'm saying. It feels messed up.
No, I think they absolutely enjoy it. O'Brien oversees Winston's prolonged torture sessions. O'Brien tells Winston that his crime was refusing to accept the party's control of history and his memory. As O'Brien increases the pain, Winston agrees to accept that O'Brien is holding up 5 fingers, though he knows that O'Brien is holding up 4. He agrees that anything O'Brien wants him to believe is true. He begins to love O'Brien because O'Brien stops the pain. He even convinces himself that O'Brien isn't the source of the pain. O'Brien tells Winston that Winston's current outlook is insane, but that torture will cure him. So there's the 4 finger scene, which I think is something that shows up a lot. I blanked on the word iconic. That was the word I was going for. Yeah, it's an iconic scene, which is Brian holds up 4 fingers, says, "How many fingers am I holding up?" Winston says 4, and O'Brien says, "No, this is 5." And then they torture him. And then he does it again. "How many fingers?" 4. No, this is 5. And he tortures him again, and they torture him until he says, "Oh, that's 5 fingers." So he holds up 4, and he's tortured until he sees 5. And this scene was reproduced in Star Trek Next Generation. Picard was captured by the Borg, and they did lights. And they're like, they showed 4 lights and how many lights, and he said 4, and they tortured him until he saw 5. And I think it's important, even though we just blew past it there, it's an important scene because if they can get you to disbelieve your own eyes and say what you're told to say, eventually you'll believe what you're told to believe. So I think it's absolute. They show as the basis of control, right?
Yeah,
which is
what they're showing you what the reality is.
Right.
Like what's in front of your eyes can't be the reality.
Can't be the reality.
It has to be what they tell you the reality is.
Right. Yeah. And we see that so much now where you're being told, no, it's not. That's not what you think it is. That's not what you see it is. This is, we say it's this, so this is it. And we see that so much now that it's kind of amazing. And it really is that entryway into, you could say, I don't want to say mind control, but
it is.
just
it's total
controlling.
brainwashing.
Yeah.
I mean, it cuts critical thinking completely out.
It does.
Nobody has any critical thinking anymore.
Right.
If you do, then you would say, no, I mean, that's 4. I learned how to do math. I learned how to count. I can tell it's 4.
Yeah.
You're trying to gaslight me. But if you're always that, and that's the way you learn, then that's, you're a sheep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that so much now. And it was a big part of the story, as I said, and they replicated it in Star Trek. And then in Star Trek, then he's like, I think they talked to Picard later. He's like, I saw 5.
I can't believe Jean-Luc would see 5.
Right. He's like, I saw 5 at the end. You guys rescued me, but I saw 5. For Winston, no one rescues him. There's no rescue. I'm going to give that away since we're working through it now. No one rescues him, right? And the whole thing O'Brien was saying, it's not just about lying to me that you see 5. We're going to keep doing this.
It's about believing you see 5.
Right. We're going to keep doing this until I'm convinced you believe.
Yeah, until they break you, until you crack.
Right.
Once your sanity cracks and you don't believe what you see anymore.
You can't believe it.
And you wait for a prompt to tell you is when it's done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we see this so much now. I mean, we see it so much now in what's going on, where they say one thing, you're like, no, it's this, like, no, it's that. And if you don't agree with us, you're going to be in trouble.
And we wonder why mental illness is on the rise.
Right. Yeah. We see that so much now.
So it's just the stress of all of it. In the back of the mind, subconscious stress of all of it.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's the simplicity of the fingers that is part of, I would say, the process part of the trap. Because if O'Brien was like, hey, 6,085 times 10,364 is 8
Jay
million.
And I would be like, whatever.
Right, exactly. You'd be like, if you say so. You'd be like, if you say so, I don't really know, but okay. It's the simplicity of it is where that really comes in, because it's quite obvious. No, it's not. No, we're going to torture you until it is.
Yeah, it's very rudimentary.
Right. It's the
sky's blue. or the sky's green.
Right. It's the simplicity of it that's part of it. And that's why you're like, no, 4 fingers, 5 fingers, 4 lights, 5 lights, whatever it is, it's the simplicity.
Yes, but to me,
this essential to
this part is so scary because this part shows how much stress you could put the human mind under, and eventually you can break somebody.
Cracks. Yeah. And that's the torture chapter. I think that's the whole point of chapter 3 is the torture chapter. And I feel like at the time when this was written, World War II, Spanish Civil War, these kind of things were happening. Right. So, I mean, I think that's reflected, but I didn't want to just blow past this because I think that's the only part we talk about it. I think not only iconic, but highly relevant scene. So, all right, we'll keep going. Who controls the past?
He does hold out. He does hold out for a long time, Winston.
Yeah.
Like
he does,
Yeah. And even through to the next part with Julia, like I was surprised when he did. I really was. Yeah.
But that's what they kept him. They didn't put him in room 101 yet until that final break. They realized they got to the final breaking point, and that's when he goes to room 101. But they knew until that happened that he wasn't going to break.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past, which is sort of true and something we see nowadays a lot. O'Brien tells Winston that the party has perfected the system practiced by the Inquisition, the Nazis, and the Soviets. It has learned how to eliminate its enemies without making martyrs of them, which is super important, right? And that's the whole process. Is it's not just pulling people off the street and torturing them and killing them or sending them back and saying, we tortured them, because that does get that martyrdom.
Yeah.
Their whole point is convert them, break them, send them back broken, and keep doing it until they love us. And then they go back in the society like, man, I was tortured, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
I'm so glad they tortured me. I'm so glad.
Because they're reborn.
Right. They send them back reborn. Yeah. They're going to torture them until they're reborn.
Because it's always the reborn person that advocates the most for it. It's always the person who just quit smoking that talks all about
the born again. Smoking. Yeah. Nothing against the born again religious group.
No, it's just
the idea of being
right, because you feel you're excited because you feel like you've been reborn into something, and you want to share your excitement for your awakening is more like it.
And if they were just pulling people and torturing them, people would be like, oh, they're horrible and evil. And I'm sure everyone says they're horrible and evil, but it's a different end result.
No, they want you to thank them
for being tortured.
All the torture that they did to you, which is the most messed up part of it.
Right. And they do. All right. It converts
and they call
them.
It curing. They cure.
Curing. Right. We hear that a lot now.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to cure.
Yeah.
Very patriarchal mindset of like, we're doing this because we love you.
Right. That's why they call it ministry of love. Right. The ministry of love. We're going to do this because we love you and we want to fix you. We're going to fix you. Yeah. I mean, how far are we away from that now? I don't think we're that far. Unfortunately,
no.
I don't think we are. Yeah. Ministry of love. We love you. We're going to bring you in, and we're going to fix you. It's purification by fire. We're going to fix you. We're going to make you better. All right. So it converts them and then ensures that in the eyes of the people, they cease to exist because they're broken and they're not martyrs. They're not big heroes like Braveheart, the scene in Braveheart at the end where they capture him and they rip his guts out and he's yelling freedom. There's none of that. We're not giving you any of that stuff. We're just going to slow torture you until you break. And then we'll send you back out. There's none of that yelling freedom.
Right.
Slowly, Winston begins to accept O'Brien's version of events. He begins to understand how to practice doublethink, refusing to believe memories he knows are real. O'Brien offers to answer his questions, and Winston asks about Julia. O'Brien tells him that Julia betrayed him immediately, which may or may not be true.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
She seems like she would.
She didn't. She didn't have a lot of integrity.
Right, kind of a skank. I know it's a love story. She came off a little skanky.
There is no love there.
A little skanky. Winston asks if Big Brother exists in the same way that he himself does, and O'Brien replies that Winston does not exist. Winston asks about the Brotherhood, and O'Brien responds that Winston will never know the answer to that question. Winston asks what waits for him in room 101, and O'Brien states that everyone knows what waits in 101.
You know what's in 101.
He does that, you know what's there. You already know, buddy. We don't have to tell you. Just like when he captured him, he's like, you already knew. You already knew this is what was going to happen. You already knew who I worked for. You already know what's in room 101. So stop asking.
Your worst
questions.
Nightmare.
It's your worst nightmare.
Yeah, everything that
literally your
you've been
nightmare.
saying might happen to you is going to happen to you.
Right. All the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So after weeks of interrogation and torture, O'Brien tells Winston about the party motives. Winston speculates that the party rules the proles for their own good. O'Brien tortures him for this answer, saying that the party's only goal is absolute, endless, and limitless power. It's power for the sake of power. We hear that a lot nowadays. That's kind of a normal thing, but that's what that was kind of their deal. They wanted power for the sake of power. Generational power, and I don't think we get into it here. And that's sort of what O'Brien's point was, the way their government had existed was the idea of this generational power that would go on. So not in the sense of an empire, of a democracy. It was very Kafkaesque. Yeah, it was very Kafkaesque, and I kind of want to lean into Kafka at some point, but very Kafkaesque of, there's this brotherhood and there's the party, and you don't really know who the leader is, and there's in and there's out, but they were trying to, and they got into the book a little bit. I don't think we'll touch on it here. The idea of how it was kind of decentralized structure in such a way that it could go on forever. Right. By clearing the past, clearing the history, its sword would be this 1,000 years of darkness kind of thing.
1,000 years of darkness. Chuck Norris, he said it.
It's 1,000 years of darkness. Winston argues that the party cannot alter the stars of the universe, and O'Brien answers that it could if it needed to, because the only reality that matters is in the human mind, which the party controls. Right. O'Brien forces Winston to look in a mirror. He's completely deteriorated and looks gray and skeletal, so they've been torturing him for a while. He's like, all right, made him take off his clothes, look in the mirror. He's like, you think I look bad? You got to look at yourself, buddy. How about you look in a mirror? Winston begins to weep and blames O'Brien for his condition. O'Brien replies that Winston knew what would happen the moment he began his diary. O'Brien acknowledges that Winston had held out by not betraying Julia, and Winston feels overwhelmed with love and gratitude toward O'Brien for recognizing his strength. However, O'Brien tells Winston not to worry, as he will soon be cured. O'Brien then notes that it doesn't matter, since in the end, everyone is shot anyhow. So he sort of has that, no matter how much pain you put up with, no matter how much you survive, no matter how far this goes, we're gonna kill you in the end.
Right.
Anyway.
So then why do it?
Right. We're gonna torture
that's what I'm saying.
until you're cured.
They're enjoying it. They let it go on longer than it needed to be able to take him in, to then torture him until they could break him.
Until they break him.
To then shoot him.
To shoot him, yep.
So what is the point of all of it unless you're completely sadistic and you're enjoying the process?
Well, and that's what we said. If they didn't break him and put him back out in the world, then he could be a martyr.
But they don't put him back out in the world. They don't.
No.
Oh, I thought they didn't.
They did. Yeah. No. At the end. Yeah. They put him back out in the world so he can wander around this broken fool that loves the party, and then eventually they kill him.
Oh.
So
I thought that was all just a hallucination.
No, they let him out.
When he was getting tortured.
Yeah, no, they let him out. Yeah.
Wow.
No.
I didn't know he was really out.
They let him out. Yeah, because he meets Julie. Yeah, we'll get to it.
I thought that was all.
There's not a lot.
Where his brain went.
No, I don't think
like
so.
a happy place.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then
I don't think so.
I am the first person to say I'm wrong.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Okay with that.
I'm not saying you're wrong. All right. After some time, Winston is transferred to a more comfortable room, and the torture eases. He dreams constantly of Julia, his mother, and O'Brien in the Golden Country. He gains weight and is allowed to write on a small slate. He comes to the conclusion that he was foolish to oppose the party alone and tries to make himself believe in party slogans. He writes on his slate, freedom is slavery, 2 and 2 make 5, and God is power.
Until they change 2 and 2 make 6.
It's whatever they want. And that's even
and then they're going to have to get rid of that.
That's what O'Brien says. It's whatever we say it is, guys. Yeah. It's like, we need to be clear on that. It is whatever we say it is. One day, in sudden passionate fit of misery, Winston screams out Julia's name many times, terrifying himself. Though he knows that crying out in this way will lead O'Brien to torture him, he realizes his deep desire to continue hating the party. He tries to bottle up this hatred so that even he will not recognize it. Therefore, when the party kills him, he will die hating Big Brother, a personal victory, but he cannot hide his feelings. So before we go in, he was, I think he was asleep or something like that. Out of nowhere, he starts screaming his name, and he's like, shoot, they heard that. Now they're going to come torture me more. But they kind of gave him time. They like gave him time, gave him food. He was doing exercises in his cell room.
He's doing his morning.
They're letting him now feel like he's done being tortured, and they're like healing him before they start torturing him again.
That is, I mean, that's some really
commitment.
Sadistic stuff.
That's some commitment. Yeah. When O'Brien arrives with the guards, Winston tells him that he hates Big Brother. O'Brien replies that obeying Big Brother is not sufficient. Winston must learn to love Big Brother. O'Brien then instructs the guards to take him to room 101, the big room.
You know.
You know what's there. You know. All right. In room 101, O'Brien straps Winston to a chair, then clamps Winston's head so that he cannot move. He tells Winston that room 101 contains the worst thing in the world. He reminds Winston of his worst nightmare, the dream of being in a dark place with someone terrible on the other side of the wall, and informs him that rats are on the other side of the wall. O'Brien picks up a cage full of enormous squirming rats and places it near Winston. He says that when he presses a lever, the door will slide up and the rats will leap into Winston's face and eat it. With the withering, starving rats just inches away, Winston cracks and he screams that he wants O'Brien to subject Julia to the torture instead of him. O'Brien, satisfied by this betrayal, removes the cage. So it was, and I think they even said that basically whatever they thought your worst fear was is what was in what they were going to have set up for you in room 101.
Right.
You know, that was it, whatever it was. And for him, it was the rats. And that was, read some of the historical tortures, and the cage with the rats on the face was actually a thing.
Yeah.
It was actually a thing, the hungry rats. Yeah, pretty horrible. People do horrible stuff. Yeah, the hungry rats. Yeah, horrible.
Do not eat meat, so I just
it was a thing.
Don't get it.
Starving rats, it was a thing.
I guess
if they're hungry, they would. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a thing. Yeah, it was an actual. That was an actual torture.
I know some of the things back in the day, man.
Yeah.
Not nice people.
No, not nice people. Horrible times, horrible stuff. Yeah. All right, book 3, chapter 6, and this is it. This is the last chapter of the story. It says Winston, now free, sits at the Chestnut Trail Cafe, where demissed party members go to drink. He enjoys a glass of Victory Gin and watches the telescreen. He accepts everything the party says and does without acknowledging it to himself. He can still smell the rats. On the table, Winston traces 2 + 2 = 5. In the dust, he remembers seeing Julia on a bitter cold day that March. She had thickened and stiffened and now found the thought of sex with her repulsive. They acknowledged that they had betrayed one another and agreed to meet again. Though neither is truly interested in continuing their relationship, Winston thinks he hears the song lyrics under the spreading chestnut tree, I sold you and you sold me, which he heard when he saw the political prisoners there many years earlier. He begins to cry. He remembers a moment of happiness with his mother and sister, but thinks it must be a false memory. He looks up and sees a picture of Big Brother on the telescreen, making him feel happy and safe. As he listens to the war news, he reassures himself on both the great victory he has won over himself and his newfound love for Big Brother. And perhaps you might pretend afterwards that it was only a trick and that you just said it to make them stop and really didn't mean it. But that isn't true. So that's sort of, I think that's sort of the end. Then we kind of jumped through that. I thought, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because this was like 4 or 5 books ago for me, that they gave him another job.
Yeah.
I thought he had another job, but it was obviously like a meaningless job.
Yeah.
That he had to go to, and it was like a bunch of other broken people would get together and have to like vote on stuff or something.
Yeah, some committee thing. Yeah.
Right. He got stuck. They gave him a new job, and he was just sort of living his life, maybe waiting to get executed whenever they felt like it.
I don't know. I thought it was all not real.
It could be, right? I mean, that is a possibility.
I'm not the one to ask at this point because I thought it was all like.
I mean, maybe it was. They didn't really say that, but that's possible. That's one possible interpretation, that he died in prison, and this was.
What did the Spark Note say?
That was what it said.
Right. Well. Right.
It starts out with he's out.
It was for realsies.
Right, for realsies. For realsies, he got out. He bumps into Julia accidentally, but they had both been tortured, and she admitted, like, "Yeah, I gave you up."
Yeah, I slipped on you, buddy.
He's like, "I gave you up too," and then they just kind of parted ways. Like that was it.
Yeah,
not too interested.
Well, at least we're smart with that.
Right.
Look where it ended him up.
Right.
The first time.
Ended up in the torture room.
Yeah, but didn't he get a bullet in the head at the end?
Well, they don't say. Yeah. Right, they don't say. He was sort of expecting it. Yeah, they kind of left.
Which
kind
is kind of like me with the end of Sopranos.
Right, it's a Soprano.
I just always assume Tony gets shot in the
Right, does he get shot or not? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a Soprano ending.
Ended it.
He knew they were going to come kill him at some point.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't know when.
All right.
Yeah.
I do remember with this ending scene, one of the opposing countries they were at war with was making a big move, and it was like there was a possibility that that they would lose, and he was happy about it.
Yeah,
but he was also unhappy about it. I think that's like you were saying. He was it's all up in the air. Like, did he actually get his promise to hate Big Brother before he was shot?
Right, right, maybe,
Yeah, and so so the ending, it is a little bit up in the air, isn't it? I can understand why Thomas Lipinski wanted to make the sequel.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So that was it. I know we're only 36 minutes in.
I liked it. I thought it was a good book.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those seminal books that been around a long time, still very relevant, and it's inspired a lot of other books. So I've already read The Iron Heel. That was like 3 books ago for me. And I could see how it could have inspired this.
Oh, okay.
But also
I'm
you can
only
see,
like a chapter in, so.
Yeah, when you read, I read the story of Orwell and Spanish Civil War. You can also see how that would inspire this. So, I mean, you can see the inspirations for the book, and you can certainly see the modern relevance, unfortunately, for the book, I think.
Well, I think, the modern relevance is definitely there.
Right. Yeah. Is it?
Which just goes to show that the idea of somebody back then to think that this is what it could become, it's just, human nature to think the worst. What is the worst that could happen? That's it.
This is it.
It's just we've slowly allowed it to happen.
Right. Yeah.
Because clearly how they tortured him and how they cat and moused him and all of that, there was a pleasure that went into it for them, which is, to me, pretty darn evil to do that. Like, what do you think your purpose is here on Earth? Certainly not that. Those are the people making it difficult for everyone else.
Right. When they're talking ministry of love, that's like government employees. This is their entire job.
Yeah. I would starve before I would do that job. But people have different ethics.
Right. Yeah.
I'd be like, whatever.
They had none.
Well, that's the problem.
Right, they had no ethics. It was whatever.
You got to have your own ethics that you live by, though.
Yeah.
You got to be able. You got to be willing to die.
Yeah.
As well, though, they think they're curing. They think, like they've been told that this is for their benefit, and so again, the 2 and 2 makes 5. It's so clearly obvious to us that what they're doing is wrong. But if they've been told since they were children that what they're doing is helping people,
do
they realize that they're doing wrong?
Right. That gets into the whole you had mentioned before, like, isn't there something inside people that kind of say, is this right or is this wrong? You got that in you. And I mean, for me personally, I remember going to Catholic school and the nuns would be like, if you don't go to church on Sunday, you're going to hell. And I'm like, that's not the God that I read about.
Yeah.
That's not the God that I believe. And even though the people who were teaching me about God still said, if you don't go and do this, you're going to go to hell. If you don't do this, you're going to go to hell. That's what I was taught in the 70s and 80s. And I never believed it because I'm like, that's not my God. My God would not do that.
Yeah.
So even as a child and growing up, there was something in me that said, I don't care what you people tell me. That is not right.
Yeah.
That just didn't feel right to me.
Well, there were two things. One was the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, that was good.
Stanford prison experiment. So they've made movies on it. There's books on it. The short version, it's old. The Stanford prison experiment, basically they took a group of students and I'd say split them in half. Doesn't matter, 60, 40, 80, 20, whatever it was, and said, okay, you guys are guards and you guys are prisoners. And these were just random people off the street, right? And now we're gonna play prison. We're gonna play prison. So then they took all the prisoners and they shaved their heads and they actually made them wear dresses and they put them in prison cells. And then they're like, okay, you guys are guards. You got to guard them. And the guards got better food and they were kind of starving the prisoners. By the end of the experiment, they had to stop because the guards had become so abusive to the prisoners, and the prisoners were like, I'm just a student. I didn't do anything. But they've gone so far because they had that authority.
Because they have the power.
Right. They had the power. They had the authority.
It's corrupting.
Right. They went so far down and so dark on the kids that were prisoners, and people forgot basically that because they were locked in this room. Everyone sort of forgot they were just students off the street and no one was actually a guard and no one was a prisoner. Like they were into it. They had all got so locked in. The prisoners were like, oh my God, I'm never getting out of here. I'm a prisoner. It's like, dude, it's a week. It's a 1 week experiment. But all that was forgot. They were so deep into it.
Yes, but to me, that shows the basic human nature of those people.
That was the point.
If I was on the side of the guards, I'm not taking pleasure in beating on people.
That's the question.
It doesn't matter how much it is, because as a 6-year-old, when the nun said you're going to hell, I'm like, I'm not.
Right. No, I get what you're saying, but that was the point of the experiment, is they randomly split the group in two.
Right.
And none of the guards should have gone psycho, but they did. Basically, it was the whole point of it. And then there was another one. I think it was the.
It showed that basic human nature is pretty.
People are pretty crappy. People are pretty
yeah.
crappy. And then there was another one. I think it was. I think the Milgram experiment. I might have the name wrong, but basically what they set up was, so they bring someone in and you sit them down, and there's a dial, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a dial, and then there's somebody you can see behind a screen, right? And the person's in a chair, and then a authority figure comes out and says, okay, when you turn the dial, it's going to electrocute him.
Yeah.
Right. So the guy says, okay, it's going to electrocute him. Authority figure says, okay, go ahead. And now it's time to give him a level 1. So he gives him a level 1. The guy's like, starts screaming a little bit. And the person's like, what? He says, don't worry. Go ahead and do level 2 now. So he turns it to level 2 and the guy's screaming more. And he's like, what am I doing? He says, you need to do, this is important. Now go ahead and do level 3. And he does level 3, and the guy's screaming even more. And the guy's like, well, what am I doing?
I'd be like, dude, do it yourself. After the first time, I'd be like, spin it yourself. I'm out.
Right. Then the authority guy says, okay, now level 4. He turns to level 4, and the guy starts screaming, and then just kind of stops screaming and hunches over. And the point was, first of all, no one was hurt. But the person pointing the dial didn't know that, and it just
didn't care.
Well, that's it, right? It shows when presented with an authority figure that's telling you need to turn the dial, people disconnect from that. Well, I guess it's not my responsibility. I'm just a dial turner. They're telling me to hit him with a number 5 now. I guess
that's what people tell themselves
more.
to fall asleep.
Right. Electrocute him even more.
Yeah.
And they were just grabbing people off the street and saying, all right, hit him. No, sir, you need to do level 5. Okay, I guess I'll do level 5 then. That's what you told me to do. It's completely disassociated from the fact that into the context of the experiment, they think they're torturing somebody, but they were just told to.
Because some rando told you to.
Right,
I was telling a nun, sorry, I don't believe you. This is why I got sent to the principal's office a lot too.
That's what I'm saying, though. I mean, valid experiments, and that, it shows people do conform, and they do become very cruel, and people suck.
I honestly do not get it. How do you fall asleep at night knowing that you spun that dial that many times and hurt a person?
Then maybe kill them.
Did you tell yourself,
Well, they told me to.
Because this rando told me to.
Right,
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make you a good person.
Right.
But that's me.
Right.
All you people out there that would spin the dial, I apologize. But I wouldn't do it.
Right. All right. Well, that's all I've got.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe they were doing recruitment for the Ministry of Love.
Right. Probably. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Probably.
They probably were.
Exactly. Like, hey, we got a job for you.
Right.
You skipped ahead. We told you 1 and you went 10. We got you, buddy. We got a job.
You're going to be the person at the antique store.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to narc on everybody.
Right.
Snitches get stitches, guys.
Right.
They obviously didn't learn that. All right, so our next book.
Next book, Iron Heel, Jack London, Socialist Revolution in America in the early 1900s.
Yes.
Good book. A lot. They go deep into kind of the socialist mindset, which is interesting. We'll get into this. We'll skip next week, but we'll get into this into the introduction, which I read some of the a little bit about the book. And at the time, people actually thought a socialist revolution might happen. So it's sort of, it's fiction, but they kind of expected, people kind of thought this was actually going to happen.
In the early 1900s?
In the early 1900s, they thought this was the way to go. They thought this was what was going to happen in America. I don't think it's a spoiler because it's not a big part of the story, but he actually predicted a war with Germany in the early 1900s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which we call World War II.
Wow.
Right, which is kind of interesting. He predicted a war with Germany back in the 1900s, and it could just be they maybe were the two big superpowers at the time, the U.S. and Germany, whatever, for whatever reason, he actually
there could have been
he predicted a major war with Germany. It's not a huge part of the book, so I don't think I'm giving away anything. Just interesting. We'll talk about that when we jump.
I like how he writes.
Jack London,
I think the book is written. Has almost like the air of a formality to it. It's not the way we speak now.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine people, like a couple of the scenes, people are sitting in parlors, and I could see the silverware and the Victorian
you could visualize yourself there.
I could, yeah. I mean, this one, my grandparents were born when they lived,
right.
I mean, and they were in Chicago too. So for me, it's my hometown when my parents were living. So. I mean, I think it's interesting. I'm not very far into it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's all right.
I look forward to finishing the book.
Finishing the book. We'll get into it. It's a long book. It feels like a long book.
Well, yeah, we're taking next week off because it's Mother's Day, but also people need a little time to read.
People need time to read, right? Yeah, there's got to have the reading time. I got to have time to write. We'll write up our chapters on it. It will be an interesting. Dip the toes in socialism. There's a lot of Karl Marx in the book, a lot of explaining some of the ideals behind socialism. So we can agree and disagree with that as we go into it. But it is a background, right? The whole pretense of the story of socialist revolution, they have to explain why. So you do get to learn a little bit about socialism just by reading the book. Right? It's written. So that's an interesting side of it.
All
righty.
What do you got?
Oh, my kitten just tried to jump on the bed and she jumped right into my hand that was patting the bed, and I punched her.
Oops.
Well, okay, I won't come up.
All right then.
The poor thing.
Oops.
I know. She's run away now.
So I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
No. Something I noticed in the Iron Heel is just the common threads of the class, the class divisions, and
absolutely.
We've been talking about for a very long time,
Yeah. He goes big on class divisions. Some of the arguments that they make are more relevant to then than now, like child labor. They get a lot into child labor on that, It is interesting. It is interesting to get through it.
My grandfather went to school until 3rd grade.
Right.
And then he started working.
Right. And that was it.
Carrying blocks of ice.
Right.
Like, up into apartments to put in people's ice boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get into
was he
it.
8 years old?
Right.
His father died and he needed to make money. So
yeah.
Child labor there wasn't, you have to be a certain age to work then.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I sometimes use the child labor because I'd sometimes joke around. There was kids working in mines. There was kids clearing fires and starting fires and fetching water. And my kids grumble about the dishwasher.
Right. I'm just asking you to bring the trash
Exactly. Yeah. I used to joke about that because my son, I'd be like, I can get him to do hard work all day. Child labor was so good they had to make it illegal because like I could put him, he'd do hard work all day. Like I see why they had to make it illegal. This is too good. This is too great. He would work hard.
Good. yeah, that's good.
So good they had to outlaw it.
I had girls. It wasn't
right.
Like
Yeah,
that.
Girls. No, it's different. Daughters is different than sons. Sons will actually work really hard. But no, I used to joke about that. So good they had to make it illegal.
You have to name him. What was the horse? Oh, the main horse in Animal Farm. The guy, the one that helped.
Oh, I know who you're talking
went
about.
To the glue farm.
Yeah, the glue farm guy. I don't remember his name, but yeah, he was great. He was the hard worker.
You can nickname your son that.
Exactly.
Right.
No, he was a good.
He's married now. He's not working hard for anybody.
Right, he's married.
Yeah,
he's married now. He's got his own place, doing his own thing.
That's good. That's nice. That's good.
All right, should we wrap it up there? A few minutes early. We'll take next week off, and we'll be back.
Yay.
Yep, 2 weeks.
1984.
1984, done.